Okay, let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we invite your presence into our study this morning. We ask, Lord, for your continued guidance as we look into the history of Joshua as it relates to the lines and to the present. We ask, Lord, that you can guide and direct each of our minds, that in our personal study they can be enlightened, our minds can be enlightened by your word through thy Holy Spirit. Be with us in this study now, and we ask that we can see things clearly. And we pray and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we had started going through the line of Joshua yesterday, and I've done quite a bit of work on it, really trying to get this whole history in my head. And there's a lot of detail. So we had finished off with Exodus 33:11, where which I'm going to go back there. So in 33:11, to understand what this means, the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. And he turned again into the camp, but his servant Joshua the son of Nun, a young man, departed not out of the tabernacle. And we had tied this in to what event?
Manasseh.
Okay, so we used chapter 33:11, which is from 2 Chronicles 33:11, which is the first verse on the top of the 1843 chart. And then we're tying this to the end, symbolically, of the 2520 for Northern Israel, which would be 1798. And does that make sense to people, if anybody's thought about it over the last day?
So you're saying this is what, the time of the end? Joshua's line.
Yes, we're putting it at the time of the end, because we were trying to decide with Joshua exactly when his time of the end would be. Now we know that Joshua is first mentioned in this battle against Amalek, right? So we're tying these all together. We're not saying that the one verse marks exactly the time of the end, but in Joshua's line, it's going to be showing him being chosen as this leader, just as Miller's line is showing him being chosen as this leader. So, and that's the thing, is there could be a line of Joshua that's a bigger line, and then a smaller line just dealing with Joshua himself. That is, just as Miller has a line that shows him being chosen as a leader, he's also part of a bigger line. And I think this is the same case with Joshua. So this first part would just be his personal line, but not the line of that whole reform line. Based on how I'm looking at these things, which I've been studying. So I don't know if that makes sense to people, but we see that with Miller, and I think we see the same thing with Joshua. So we have Joshua being, he's chosen by Moses to choose out men to go fight with Amalek. And so we have this battle. And obviously I'm taking this battle and I'm placing it with the Battle of Plattsburgh. Now, there's a whole bunch of symbols here also. The chiasm, we have Aaron and Hur holding up the hands with Moses in the middle. We looked at all those types of things there in that as well. And then there was, so that was all in chapter 17. And then and there's something there in chapter 17 as well, when Israel defeats Amalek. For the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek under heaven. Now, what's the significance of Amalek here?
Well, it's the first enemy that Israel encounters after they leave Egypt.
Okay. And when are they going to be dealt with?
Well, they were meant to be dealt with initially, probably when maybe after they invaded the land, or maybe during it, but it actually occurred 400 years after the sentence was given.
Right, and that sentence is going to be given in Deuteronomy.
Yeah, so that's in 1493.
Yeah, so we're going to have this sentence given then, and then it's going to be dealt with in the 4th year of Saul.
Yeah, so that would be 1093.
Yeah, well, that technically 1093 would be the 5th year of Saul, but it depends how those years line up. But anyway, it's going to be 400 years later, according to Ellen White. Right? So there's some significance there in that, even though it's not mentioned here, there is going to be a prophecy regarding Amalek. But that's going to be given at the end of the 40 years wilderness wandering. So this isn't at the end. This is at the beginning of the 40 years wilderness wandering that we're going to have, and this is going to be at Rephidim, that we're going to have this situation with Amalek. But then a sentence is going to be pronounced, whatever it is, 40 years later, by Moses. And that's going to be fulfilled 400 years after that. So it's just a note there that there's this connection, which we will look at in more detail later on. And so then we're going to have this situation in Exodus 24, where we're going to see that Moses and Joshua. So Joshua is the minister of Moses, and he's going to be there when they go up to receive the 10 Commandments. He's going to be ministering to Moses, and he's going to come down with Moses in chapter 32. So when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. So he's going to be with Moses when that happens. And I think that's pretty significant. Now, so those are the events that happen in the book of Exodus. And chapter 33, verse 11, that's where we sort of ended with that. So I'm taking all of these events that happen here in connection with Joshua in Exodus as sort of marking that place at the beginning of his ministry. And how we're going to put those on a line, we haven't decided yet. But the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. So this is an important verse in and of itself. But the fact that Joshua is not going to depart out of the tabernacle. So he goes into the tabernacle with Moses, but he's going to stay there when Moses leaves. Any thoughts on this so far of what we have here in the book of Exodus regarding Joshua? Okay. Now, we're also going to encounter Joshua in the book of Numbers. Now, the one that I find rather interesting, and you're not going to see it here. I have here my search down at the bottom, but the verse itself doesn't have Joshua's name in connection with it because it's spelt differently. And that's going to be Numbers chapter 13. And where is it here? Yeah, verse 16. It says, "These are the names of the men which Moses sent to spy out the land." So at the time they choose these 12 spies, we're going to have a name change. That is, Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Jehoshua. So what is the significance of the name change here?
Well, we normally connect it with entering into a covenant.
Okay, so it's entering into a covenant. And where do we place that in a line?
The empowerment of the first angel.
Okay, so the empowerment of the first angel. Now, why do we do that? I read up a little bit on the name change, just trying to solidify it in my mind, how that developed in the movement. So I went through some of Jeff's papers. It's not really clear in the things that I could find, but where would we primarily look at the name change?
Well, Jacob to Israel.
Okay, what about Abraham, Abram being changed to Abraham?
At the circumcision.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so at the circumcision, is that where it occurs? Genesis 17.
When he's 99.
Yeah. So he's going to have his name changed here at the circumcision. And, so in that context, when we look at the circumcision, when we dealt with Moses, that was the empowerment of the second angel's message for Moses' personal line. That's where we lined his line up with Miller. And when it came to the Exodus line, we put that at the time of the end. That is, it was all in connection with the burning bush and all the signs and different things that were going to happen. So he makes a covenant basically at the beginning of the Exodus line. And then the formalization of that message is Moses and the elders meet with the Moses and Aaron meet with the elders. But we put it at the second angel's message being empowered in what am I doing? Moses line. I want to look at Abraham's. So I meant the wrong line completely. I don't know. I just looked up circumcision and started reading that one. So where's Abraham's line? Did I not write Abraham's line out? I don't think I did. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to Abraham, not Moses, even though it does relate. So with Abraham, yeah, here's our line, Abraham. Okay, so for some reason I didn't draw Abraham's line here. I think I wasn't drawing it out then. Okay, so Abraham, in his personal line, where did we put circumcision? How did we line up his line? Let's see why I didn't draw it out. Sure I did. Okay. Maybe it never got saved in this file. Because remember, we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're going to be the three angels' messages. And then we're going to have Abraham's line. Okay, Dwight?
Do you mean to be showing the scripture as you're talking about the lines?
No, I wasn't. I could show it.
I think it'd be a good idea to show the lines.
Okay. Okay, I'll show the lines here because I don't have it drawn out. All I have here, for some reason, and maybe it's in another file, because sometimes I end up saving the files under different names and things get lost. But all I have here is Abraham's, Isaac, and Jacob. But we did have a personal line of Abraham. Maybe I did. Maybe I drew it on the board and didn't draw it on the computer. I'm going to have to look that up. But in Abraham, we had 3 covenants and then a 4th. And so we had the first covenant, of course, when he is going to leave Haran. That's chapter 12. Chapter 15 is the second. And chapter 17, which is the circumcision, is the third. And that's where he's going to get his name change. So Abraham gets his name change at the circumcision. Now, Joshua is going to have a name change as well. Right? So we know that we have Hoshea or Oshea is Joshua's original name. So he's going to have a name change. And the circumcision, what is the significance of that as far as Abraham's name change?
The name change, coming to a father of nations.
Yeah.
Instead of great father.
Yeah.
So it's showing the blessing that's going to come to him because of his faith.
Okay. So in his personal line, for Abraham, his name change comes at the third angel's message. But we can see in the line of Canaan that we have here, Abraham's name change is going to happen at the empowerment of the first angel. As Stephen talked about, that's where we place the name change as the empowerment of the first angel's message. So in a line of Joshua, which we haven't really drawn out yet, this is...
Which we probably should draw out because of all the similarities.
Right. So we have to decide here, and that's why we're looking at these events in the line of Joshua. So my view, tentatively, right, so I have to emphasize that, is that we're going to have a line here that is the reform line connected with Joshua's work. But we're also going to have a personal reform line of Joshua. That is, just as Miller has a reform line, that's part of, because he's part of the Millerite line, but he's going to have a personal line, and we line that up with the line of Moses. So Moses has a personal line as well as Miller. But we know that there's a bigger reform line than Moses, and there's a bigger reform line than Miller. And Joshua then would have a personal reform line that marks him being the one who's going to be chosen to be the leader of this reform line. But that's part of a bigger reform line. So I spent a lot of time going through the events of the book of Joshua and realizing that, the book of Joshua is pretty comprehensive as a reform line in and of itself. So that is the Israelites coming out of Egypt. There is a reform line, but the reform line of them possessing the land is a major reform line. And it would be connected with them coming out of Egypt, very similar to the reform line that we have in our history, where we have the Millerite reform line. That history would compare to Egypt. And then you're going to have the 40 years wandering in the wilderness, which in our history is the 4 generations of Adventism. And then you have our reform line. So my understanding is that Joshua's reform line is parallel to our reform line in the same way that his reform line is. These reform lines are connected to Millerite history and the Exodus history. Does that make sense to people? I don't know if I said it very well.
I think you got the basic meaning across.
Okay. And that would make sense. I mean, it would be consistent with what we've been studying, how we've laid out these lines. I've never particularly seen somebody take the reform line of Joshua and develop it as a reform line. That is, we have the reform line of the Exodus, and we could see that the story of Joshua crossing into the Jordan is part of that reform line of the Exodus, crossing the Jordan River. So Egypt to the promised land. And so we can see that there is the crossing of the Jordan. And in this reform line, see, this is the 40 years wandering in the wilderness. And then the crossing of the Jordan. So this reform line here, we know we have the Red Sea crossing, and that would be that other reform line that we had, which is a smaller reform line. So I don't know which is the best way to look at it. So we're going to have to come back to these lines in the future. Some people are frustrated with me in that we haven't resolved everything yet. But that's why we're going through this. Until we continue to go through these lines, we're not going to necessarily understand them completely. And my initial idea is that the reform line of Joshua was just an expansion on the third angel's message. But we should be able to see that waymarks in one line are different waymarks in another line. Same waymark can have different significances, which is, we know that waymarks typify each other. And so when we look at the crossing into the Jordan River, that is the second coming, right? That's what it's illustrating. And so for Millerite history, they were looking at the second coming, but the second coming didn't happen in Millerite history, or did it? Is there a way in which we mark the second coming in Millerite history? And how do we do that, if we do? Because we talked about this before when we were going through these lines.
Well, it did in a typical sense. We used the 6th seal.
Yeah.
As typifying that second coming.
Okay. Yeah, but we know, so we could use the 6th seal. I mean, and that's one way that we could do it. And that was, I think, a pretty clear way that we could see that the opening of the 6th seal is marking October 22nd, 1844, and it has all the symbols of the second coming. But we also know that we can take Daniel chapter 7, and we can see the second coming there with Christ coming to the Father, right? And that's going to be October 22nd, 1844, that there's this move from the holy to the most holy place of Christ's ministry. But we can see in our history that is going to end. So if we look at the crossing of the Jordan as the third angel's message, Ellen White says the third angel's message arrived in 1844, October 22nd, 1844. And we're now under the proclamation of the third angel's message. And it's joined by the angel of Revelation 18, which is the Sunday law. And so if we look at the story of Joshua, that Jordan River crossing serves a waymark in his line, which we would have to then define what it is. But it's going to serve a waymark in his line. And his personal line, I believe, is not, it doesn't contain the crossing of the Jordan, that his personal line ends before that, before they cross the Jordan. And that there's this bigger line then, which is that whole reform line of settling the land. So this is Egypt to the promised land. And I guess what we would do here in these lines that you're looking at, I'm just going to label them. So simple way to do it, I guess we would just call this the line of Joshua. And then this line here, conquering the land, I don't know if that's the best one, whether it includes more than that. Does this make sense to create these two different lines?
Well, you're going to have to. I mean, as we look at these things, now we have an understanding that when Moses came to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt, he had to accept the fact that he had listened to his wife and had not circumcised their youngest son, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Joshua, are we told if he personally had been circumcised before the children of Israel left Egypt? Or was it just the people that lived through the experience in the wilderness that were circumcised?
Okay. Do you have an answer to that?
I don't.
Okay, because I've never thought about the question before, so I don't have an answer.
See, the situation, though, is that until there was adherence to the law,
Mm-hmm.
until they had accepted the covenant, the people could not go forward into the promised land.
Okay.
So the symbol of the circumcision became extremely important. Now, we know that there was that Moses could not go forward to lead them until his son was circumcised.
Right. Yeah.
We've never been told directly if that meant that Moses had been circumcised in Egypt, but we're having to assume that.
Yeah, I would assume that he was when he, was 8 days old.
Okay, so we would have to then say that Joshua would have been circumcised as well before they came out of Egypt.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, we don't have an explicit statement on any of this,
right?
So, but and the importance here is that we're looking at this circumcision as this covenant that's being made, and we're talking about it because it has to do with the name change.
We're looking at it because it's a symbol of the covenant, and then the name change is a symbol of that covenant, right?
Right. Yeah. So they sort of go together. Even if they don't always occur together, they symbolize the same thing. And we see that because of Abraham in chapter 17. At least that's how I understand it, that we put the name change there. So we know we have a name change of Jacob being changed to Israel, but I think the primary reference to the name change is shown first in Abraham, being changed from Abram to Abraham. And it's associated with the covenant of the circumcision. That's there. So I don't know if I'm ready yet to draw all these things on the line of Joshua, but if we go back to the Bible here, so we know that there's going to be this name change for Joshua in Exodus, or is it Exodus? It's Numbers 13, right? Verse 16. These are the names of the men which Moses sent to spy out the land, and Moses called Hoshea the son of Nun Jehoshua. So if this is then going to be the time in which Joshua receives his name change, what is this connection of them sending in the 12 spies to spy out the land? If we're going to put it on a line, where would we put this on a line as a waymark? Now, where are they going to spy out the land from? Where are they going to be sending out these spies from?
Isn't it from Kadesh Barnea?
Yeah, so where is that, Kadesh Barnea?
Well, some maps have it like in the Negev direction, just south of Beersheba.
Yeah.
So
That's where I've always placed it, but
yeah.
Where else would it be? Is there any place else? Or you say some maps. Where else do they place it?
Basically, all the maps I've seen, then maybe I don't know, I can't remember.
Okay.
Seeing it elsewhere.
So if it's in the Negev, so they're now when they cross the Jordan, at the end of the 40 years, where are they crossing? Where are they going into the Promised Land from? It's not going to be from Kadesh Barnea, correct?
Yes, I think it's
speaks
more
of Gilgal.
Yeah, so they're going to be on the east side of the Jordan when they cross at the end of the 40 years. Correct?
Yes.
But here they're already technically into the Promised Land because they're in the Negev, they're in the south. So they're going to come up from the south here instead of from the east. So why is that? Why did they not go to the Jordan that way the first time? Why did they come through the Negev? Because we talk about the Jordan, but when they spy out the land, they're not at the Jordan River spying out the land here. So would they be, if they had entered into the land then, would they have crossed a river to get into the land? If they had gone to conquer the land at that time, 2 years into their, after they had crossed the Red Sea.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think they would have. So, but later on, they're going to have to cross the Jordan. And so why are they crossing the Jordan when they enter into the promised land? Why wouldn't they have come from the south again? I'm talking symbolically, not necessarily in practical sense.
Well, a new generation had to see God's works.
Okay. So I mean, this is in a sense, the crossing of the Jordan is a repeat of history in and of itself. I mean, I'm looking at the lines here, so you're not looking at that. And I'm still puzzling over these lines because, I have the Red Sea crossing here as the center because it symbolizes baptism. And I'm not saying that this line doesn't exist. But the crossing of the Jordan is definitely a repeat of history. Because the crossing of the Red Sea and the crossing of Jordan have some connection with each other, and that they're both the same types, yet they're different waymarks on this line. But we would have to say that the crossing of the Jordan River serves the same purpose as the crossing of the Red Sea, as part of a repeat of history.
Psalm 114 kind of joins them together.
Yeah. So Psalm 114. So let's go there. And I know we're moving really slowly here, but I'm not necessarily ready to just draw things on a line. So in Psalm 114, it says, when Israel went out of Egypt, the house of Jacob, from a people of strange language, Judah was his sanctuary, and Israel his dominion. The sea saw it and fled. Jordan was driven back. The mountains skipped like rams, and the little hills like lambs. What ailed thee, O thou sea, that thou fleddest, thou Jordan, that was driven back? Ye mountains, that ye skipped like rams, and ye little hills like lambs. Tremble, thou earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob, which turned the rock into a standing water, and the flint into a fountain of waters. Now here it's talking about the Jordan when they went out of Egypt. And you had looked at this verse in connection with one of the problems that we had in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, as trying to determine when the 40 years or the 480 years began. Correct, Stephen?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know in 1 Kings chapter 6, when it talks about it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the temple, or began to build the house of the Lord. So most people just put that back to when they crossed the Red Sea as coming out of Egypt. But when we look at Psalm 114, they're actually attaching this to the coming out, the crossing of Judah as the coming out of Egypt. And this Hebrew expression is the same idea.
The crossing of Judah or the crossing of the Jordan?
Crossing of the Jordan. I was looking at the word Judah was there in front of me. Yeah, the crossing of the Jordan is the coming out of Egypt.
Exactly, because it's the completion of coming out of Egypt.
Right. So, but we have the Red Sea also connected in the same language. So when they come out of Egypt and cross the Red Sea, we have the same language as when they come out of Egypt at the crossing of the Jordan. So it doesn't particularly mention here, though, the Red Sea. It's referring just to the Jordan River. Unless we say the sea saw it and fled, Jordan was driven back, because Jordan isn't a sea, it's a river. So I think there is some connection here with the Red Sea, but just not directly referenced.
Could we say it's allegorical?
Well, it is allegorical. I mean, what do you mean particularly by allegorical other than typological?
Well, the crossing of the Red Sea was God showing his power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was God showing his power by Moses lifting up his arms and his staff. Right?
Yeah.
They went through on dry land.
Mm-hmm.
There was no ark. There was no testimony. There was no pot of manna.
Mm-hmm.
This was Moses showing them as being a direct physical representation of the power of God.
And basically what was going to follow was the crossing of the Jordan.
Well, yes, and the crossing of the Jordan became, again, a testimony to the power of God, because here you have the priests carrying the ark with the testimony, with the pot of manna, showing them that all that has gone before is what's going to happen now.
Right. And we can see then that this line here on the top, this makes sense for the Red Sea being the arrival of the second angel's message. And the third angel is always really the completion of that message, the test. The formalization and the empowerment are all necessary to get to the passing of the test. So the crossing of the Jordan has to be the arrival of the third angel if we're going to take this line as paralleling Millerite history. Now, some other problems. So I'm just trying to look at this sort of critically. So when it comes to Ellen White comparing the wonderful manifestation of the power of God in Millerite history, which is the 1,533 days from August 11th, 1840 to October 22nd, 1844, she compares it to the Israelites coming out of Egypt. And that happens in 1533, that they cross the Red Sea. But we know they're going to cross the Jordan 40 years later. And so in some ways, she's equating that not with the end of the Israelites coming out of Egypt. At least I don't think that she's equating it with the Jordan itself. She's really referring under Moses' leadership. But we can see how the first angel's message and the second angel's message are connected. That is, the first angel's message does typify the second angel's message. So I don't see a problem with it. I mean, I don't know if people understand what I'm struggling with, but I want these lines to be the correct lines. And, there's one side of me that says, well, the Red Sea could be the arrival of the third angel, and all those things that follow, the manna, the Ten Commandments, would represent Millerite history after October 22nd, 1844. But I still think that this is the primary line from Moses to the crossing of the Jordan, because there's two different messengers here. And Moses is part of both of them, except not the third angel's arriving. And we can see that with Miller, in that he proclaims the first angel's message. He's there in the second angel's message, though it's primarily Samuel Snow. And in here we can see that Joshua is connected with this history as well, the second angel's message. And then Joshua has a personal line that's all going to be part of the second angel's message. I mean, that's when he comes into view. It's right after they cross the Red Sea at Rephidim, when Amalek attacks the back part of their group of people. So then Joshua has this personal line, which we would have to start with Rephidim, where he is at Rephidim when he's chosen to pick people who are going to fight against Amalek. But Joshua's all through this history. I mean, he's the servant of Moses. He's going to be with him on the mountain when he receives the 10 Commandments. So, and he gets his name changed when they pick out the 12 spies. And then definitely he becomes the leader who's going to lead them across the Jordan. So if we're going to take Joshua's personal reform line, we have here 7 waymarks that we would mark. That's what we're going to try to do as we go through this, try to pick where we would place this in his personal reform line and decide, what does it mean the third angel arrives, the 7 waymark, the 7th waymark. Because we know when we looked at this in Miller's line, his personal line came up to 1833 when he received his credentials. And I would assume, based upon that if we're going to take Joshua's line, what would we mark as parallel to Miller receiving his credentials? What kind of event would have to parallel that?
Would that be where he fell at Christ's feet?
Okay, so yeah, so you're talking about Joshua chapter 1, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, so after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord's, here, I got to go show you the Bible here. And Stephen, you had a comment?
Yes, I was thinking when Moses marked him out, identified him as going to be the leader.
Okay, yeah, and so we're gonna have to decide these things. So, and where is that Moses marks him out? Do you know where that is exactly?
I'll have to check.
Is that Numbers 14?
Well, no, that would have to be someplace in Exodus, because didn't he send Joshua in as a spy in Exodus?
Yeah, that's okay. What's that, Stephen?
I'm thinking it's going to be happening in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Deuteronomy chapter 3 that we see it. So we have 2 events that are being chosen. One is when God commissions Joshua, which is Joshua chapter 1. And the other one is Deuteronomy 3, when Moses when Moses is forbidden to enter the land. So it says, and I besought the Lord at that time, saying, the Lord, O Lord God, thou hast begun to show thy servant thy greatness and thy mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven or in earth that can do according to thy works and according to thy might? I pray thee, let me go over and see the good land that is beyond Jordan, that goodly mountain in Lebanon. And the Lord was wroth with me for your sakes, and would not hear me. And the Lord said unto me, let it suffice thee, speak no more unto me of this matter. Get thee up into the top of Pisgah, and lift up thine eyes westward, northward, southward, eastward, and behold it with thine eyes, for thou shalt not go over this Jordan. But charge Joshua, and encourage him, and strengthen him, for he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit the land which thou shalt see. Okay, so, that's one place.
Well, it's Deuteronomy 31, verse 7, where he actually does it before the people.
Okay, so yeah, and Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of a good courage, for thou must go with this people into the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. Right, so there it's going to be before all the people, and then we have, of course, Joshua chapter 1. And Moses went and spake these words unto all. Whoops, I'm not there. I gotta click here. And after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I have given unto you, as I said unto Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your coast. And there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of a good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which I ended up switching books there. All the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that was written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. And then we have Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the host, and command the people, saying, prepare you victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you to possess. And to the Reubenites and to the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh spake Joshua, saying, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God hath given you rest and hath given you this land. So he's going to be, there's a whole bunch here that I could look at. No, the 3 days. So what's the significance of the 3 days in this story? What does 3 days symbolize? We're going to see that in Joshua 3:2. It came to pass after 3 days.
This connection could it be connected to the third angel's message?
Okay.
Because that's the third angel arrives when they enter the Jordan, cross the Jordan. So it's going to be the third day in a sense.
Okay. So Well,
or the
that's one.
previous
That's
Christmas.
one thing. I mean, we've connected it with the covenant. We've connected it with the prediction before midnight, which confirming the covenant is the July 18th published letter of Samuel Snow, which is 3 days before midnight. So it's a symbol of the prediction before midnight being 3 days before midnight. So the question is, when we have these 3 days, can we place it on a line somewhere or connect it in a line? We know we have 3 days at the river Ahava. We have 3 days after the first day of the 5th month, and we have 3 days before the 20th day of the 9th month in the story of Ezra. Is 3 days something that can help us here? Maybe people don't know what I'm asking, because we're trying to place the third way mark in the story of Joshua in his personal line. And the question is, can we use this period of 3 days before they're going to cross the Red Sea?
The Jordan.
What's that?
The Jordan.
I didn't understand your word.
You said before they cross the Red Sea.
Oh, I meant, okay, the Jordan. Yeah, before they cross the Jordan. Okay, so before they cross the Jordan, 3 days before they cross the Jordan. And they're going to cross on what day?
The 10th day of the first month.
Yeah, it's going to be the 10th day of the first month that they're going to cross. So I would think it must be 3 days before that. That we have this commission. God commissions Joshua.
Okay, so if they're crossing on the 10th day of the first month,
yeah,
they're crossing on the same day that the lamb is selected
yeah,
for the Passover.
Yeah.
The situation with the 3 days, I believe, is a symbol of a preparation time.
Okay, it is a preparation time. We know that, but I'm just saying, as far as where we can place it on a line, can we give some specific way in which this will help us place this story?
Well, if we were looking at this with the Millerite line,
yeah,
would this commission to Joshua be the equivalent of August 11th, 1840?
Okay. Well, I don't see how. I mean, it depends which line you're looking on, because I'm looking at Joshua's personal line. So we're trying to place this as the last waymark in Joshua's personal line. Maybe on the bigger line, yeah, we could look at it and try to see if that fits.
I think that's where it fits best.
Okay. But in Joshua's personal line, where we're paralleling Miller's line, Miller's personal line, and in a sense, we're also looking at Snow's personal line, which we haven't really dealt with yet in detail, because Snow has his line of his letters, but he also has a line related to Boston and Exeter. And I take Snow's personal line as the line dealing with his letters. Maybe we did address it. I mean, I know I've drawn it out. Because Samuel Snow, his line begins on January 1st. And his line is an expansion or a zoom in onto the second angel's message. Now, Joshua's is a zoom in onto the third angel's message. At least that's how I'm taking it. And if we're going to look at Joshua's or Samuel Snow's line, he's going to end with July 18th. That's going to be 3 days before midnight. And it's the confirming of the covenant is the subject of that July 18th letter. So I would take the 3 days and say that that would line up with July 18th, 1844 in Samuel Snow's personal line. And I line up Samuel Snow's line with this movement's line that is marked on July 18th, 2020, which is 3 days before midnight. And we took the 3 days as representing July 18th, 2020 to December 25th, 2021. And then we marked that as the end of those 3 days. So I would end Joshua's personal line with Joshua chapter 1, is what I'm saying. And that all these other waymarks are these events leading to that commission from God to then go in and cross the Jordan 3 days before they cross the Jordan. Do people see my logic?
It's not out of line. It's just something I'm going to have to give further consideration.
Yeah, and it may be wrong. I mean, but we have all these events of Joshua that lead to him becoming the chosen person. And I would say once he's given the commission by God directly to cross the Jordan, that would be the arrival of the third angel, because the third angel is going to be about crossing the Jordan. And so Joshua's personal line is all an expansion of that. So in the line above, this is going to be the crossing of the Jordan that marks the third angel. And it seems to me that Joshua's line must connect with this, that he has this personal line that's bringing us to just before the crossing of the Jordan. And that we can take these different events in the life of Joshua, however we want to look at it. We got Amalek. What are all the different things that we have? Which I have made a chart here right below this. I started drawing some of these things, but not everything's here. Because I don't have Amalek and stuff. This is just all these different verses that I started working on. So I guess probably a better place to look would be here. See if I can. So we're going to have, just looking up Joshua, he's going to be chosen or selected by Moses to choose us out men to go out and fight with Amalek. Right, so we have that story, chapter 17. We then have him being Moses' minister, and he's there when the 10 Commandments are given, and he's there when they come down from the mountain and they hear the rebellion at the golden calf. And then he's also going to, in the next chapter, chapter 33:11, he's going to be in the tabernacle with Moses. And when Moses leaves, he stays in the tabernacle. And then we have, in Numbers, there's going to be a number of events, but basically he's chosen to as one of the 12 spies. And in that connection here, so let's go there again. So you're going to have this whole story. So I just want to quickly go through here. there's going to be the spy sent out. So in chapter 13, that's where, in verse 16, that's where his name is going to be changed, and it's in connection with them spying out the land. That's my understanding of that. And then the whole thing that happens after the spying out of the land. So that all that stuff in connection with the spying of the land. And then he's going to be connected to Caleb. So Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of men that went to search out the land, still lived. So you're going to find that all these people are, all the 10 of the 12 spies, 10 of them are going to be destroyed in this plague. And only Joshua and Caleb are going to survive that, of those 12 spies. And then they're also told in chapter 26 that the generation's going to die in the wilderness, but Joshua and Caleb will not. And then we're going to have a number of places where this is mentioned. Joshua to succeed Moses is mentioned also in Numbers. The Lord said unto Moses, take thee Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thy hand upon him. Set him before Eleazar the priest and before the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. Right, so we have that in Numbers. Then we're going to have the same thing in Deuteronomy, and progressively, and then finally we get to the book of Joshua. So if we're going to put these on a line, we would have to decide. So I'm going to put here, I'm going to mark this third angel one, just tentatively, as 3 days before crossing the Jordan. So if we were going to have some event that would mark the arrival of the second angel, of all those things we read in the story of Joshua, what would it be?
First, you might want to switch back to the screen where you were writing out the line.
Okay, so yeah. So we got the 3 days before the Jordan there. And I'm going to pick here at the beginning, the arrival of the first angel being this initial work with, this is going to be, I'm just going to put here Amalek. Oops.
Work with Amalek, or work or battle with Amalek?
Well, it's the battle with Amalek. I just put the word Amalek.
All right.
Yeah. To represent all of that. And so we got the 3 days before Jordan. I guess I could put before crossing. And then in connection with this, we would have to decide, because there are these events. He's connected here with the battle of Amalek. And to me, he's chosen, but then there's going to be the battle with Amalek himself. So maybe here, I'm going to write chosen. And then in this one, I can just put Amalek. Oops. Because I look at that as, in Miller's line, we have, I don't know, not sure how to deal with this. Because you're going to have he's going to be chosen. You're going to have the battle with Amalek. There's an increase of knowledge there as well. So I'm not sure how to do this. But this is his initial calling. I would put something here dealing with the second angel as having him going up into the mount with Moses, is where I would place the arrival of the second angel, something in connection with that. But I'm not sure where to place all these specific incidents, because there's quite a few incidents or places that we could do this. If we're going to take his name change, again, where does that happen? Where does the name change occur?
That's before he becomes one of the 12 spies.
Yeah, so before he becomes one of the 12 spies. So now that's going to be after the 10 commandments are given. Right? So maybe the empowerment of the first angel's message has to do with the 10 commandments. Because we need here a mighty angel to come down. So would that make sense to have when he's with Moses in the mountain, the 10 commandments? Right? I mean, there's just lots of events. And it's not just Moses in the mount. There's the events that happen afterward, coming down from the mount and then staying in the tabernacle. So again, I'm doing this tentatively. Could we make a case for the 12 spies that this is the arrival of the second angel? So what would be arguments for placing the 12 spies with the arrival of the second angel and the crossing, and 3 days before crossing the Jordan, as the third angel, this whole structure, at least at this point?
Well, you have a disappointment when they come back from spying the land.
Okay, good. So we have a disappointment, and we can see even just in the line above it, we can have a parallel, the Red Sea crossing in the Jordan, with the failed time that they ended up going into the promised land with the 3 days before crossing the Jordan. That is, these are connected. That is, there's a disappointment when they don't go into the promised land, and then there's going to be a disappointment, or not a disappointment, but there's going to be when they're going to be going into the promised land finally. And then we could place the formalization when God chooses Joshua, and then when he's proclaimed before the people. Right? And we could see how before the people that would be a formal, an empowerment of I'm just putting here people, just shorthand. Any discussion regarding the virtues of how we're laying out the line here, or the deficiencies? For Joshua's personal line.
Well, in comparing with Miller, we have attached the credentials in the sense that he's being recognized before the people as a bearer of a message.
So you would like you'd like to put that as the third?
Well, that would be an event that most likely ties in with what Miller's third angel arriving.
Okay, so let's do that here. So we're going to have him declared before the people. That's what you want to do?
Tentatively.
What's that?
Tentatively.
Oh, tentatively. Yes. Okay. So if you're going to then look at the formalization and the empowerment, because if we're looking at the 12 spies, this is about them going into the promised land, but it's going to be about Joshua being picked as the leader. So that's the idea. But what would you have as the formalization and the empowerment? So he's going to get his name changed. So maybe what I'm going to put here is also the name change, because that to me becomes a really important detail. Any more thoughts? Okay, Angela says, Joshua remaining in the tabernacle reminds me of Anna's in Luke 2:37. Yeah, there's probably something there. So he gets his name changed. But if we're going to place something on the formalization of that message, what would we do?
What was the formalization of Miller? Not way, Mark.
With Miller, well, that was 1818, as you can see there. So with Miller, we had 1818. So the arrival of the second angel was the second anniversary of the Battle of Plattsburgh. And whether that line's correct or not, or whether it's the best way to look at that line, I don't know. But you know, the first part of Joshua's personal line has to do with his initial preparation and then a calling. So a conversion or a name change, which a name change represents a conversion. And for Miller, he's converted at that anniversary. So then he's going to have 2 years of study. And then he's going to, after 2 years of study, he's going to have a message, but it's not going to be empowered until he's asked to speak. And then it's going to be the arrival of that third angel when he receives his credentials. So you're looking at the receiving of the credentials as being when he is declared before the people.
Yes, but I can't really think of anything other than being chosen.
Okay.
Relating to that.
Okay, I'm having trouble understanding you. You're kind of breaking up a little bit. So can you repeat that?
Yeah, I can't really think of any other the way marks there. 5 and 6.
Yeah, see, I would still go this way, the way that I had it. I mean, I understand what you're saying, But remember, he's invited to speak in 31, and that's where we mark the empowerment. And there's God is also there. So remember, when he's empowered with his message, he has had made this bargain with God, and then he's going to have his nephew come and invite him to speak. So that's directly from God. So there's an empowerment there. So I would look at being declared before the people. He's chosen, that is, before that, we know, but he's declared before the people, to me would be more the empowerment. And then in the third angel, he's now given a new message, right? I mean, not completely, but he's given a message personally from God. And that's going to be, again, 3 days before Jordan. And that's how I would line it up. To me, that still makes more sense if we're going to line it up with Miller. And I really like the 3 days because that lines us up with snow, July 18th. And it's a symbol of the covenant, confirming the covenant, which is Snow's July 18th published letter. And this would then show that here we have Joshua now called, right, through this whole history. It's the history of how he now is going to deliver them and bring them across the Jordan River. And that would just be an expansion of this waymark, so to speak, even though it includes, or this this history. But it's just about him being called. Because remember, we line up Moses with Miller as well. So anytime you have a messenger, he's going to have a personal reform line. But that reform line is going to follow this pattern. And there has to be symbols attached with it that would help us to understand that. Now, there's always a little bit of subjective sort of way of looking at it, as you can see Stephen and I discussing this. But we should be able to see that at least the reform line exists and that there are some things that fall naturally into place. When you have lots of events, sometimes you could group those events together to form a particular waymark. And the other part of the problem that we run into is we know that there are other waymarks that we could put on a line. But for instance, we could even zoom in. Let's say we take the story of Joshua with Moses in the Mount. Is this a reform line in and of itself?
It could be.
Well, it actually easily falls into a reform line. One is it's connected with the giving of the 10 Commandments and with the rebellion that happens with the golden calf. And you can see Joshua placed there as Moses' servant. He's also going to be the one who hears the noise, right? And then he's also going to be in the tabernacle and not leave the tabernacle. And we can easily see that that's the arrival of the third angel's message. Can we not? The story of the golden calf is the second angel's message.
It would seem to fit.
Yeah. So these are the types of problems we run into because we notice events and we can see that they have symbols attached to them. And then we would want to place them on a line, but we need to place them upon the line that we're looking at and not not place them from some other line, because that's the problem that we've had in this movement. As we look through that whole history of how Jeff developed the lines, we ran into a problem once we started to understand Millerite history in detail, in that we had moved the loud cry to after the Sunday law to a symbol we call the midnight cry before the Sunday law, even though Ellen White says that the loud cry is a parallel to the midnight cry. And we didn't know why we did that. But now we understand why, because we're zooming into a line and we can see that that midnight cry that is before the Sunday law is part of a reform line. But it's a zoom into the Sunday law reform line. So we're having the same problems here, if we want to call them problems. That is, it's just something we have to pay attention to. But because we have these structures and we have this three-step testing prophetic message and these main symbols, we shouldn't really have too much trouble recognizing that if we see a symbol, it represents something on a reform line. And we just need to know which reform line we're looking at. So I definitely would see that the empowerment of the first angel's message here in Joshua's personal reform line has things attached to it that couldn't be a reform line itself. Now, when we look at the empowerment of the second angel, one thing that's interesting to note is that this event of the Ten Commandments is an empowerment, that it has the symbols of an empowerment, and that's why it's here in this bigger line. It's the Ten Commandments. But now when we zoom into that third angel, we're going to see that Joshua's personal line is going to have a symbol of an empowerment. And that same event that's here in this line is just the empowerment of the first angel in this line. And the other thing, which I think, and we've talked about it a lot, but we have to define this period of darkness, and we didn't do that here. Because if you're looking at a reform line, you need to know what darkness exists. And when Joshua is called, what is the darkness that they now experience when Joshua is chosen there to fight against Amalek? What is the darkness? Is the darkness the wilderness?
That could work.
Yeah. So to understand that they're in the wilderness and they need to come out of the wilderness. They got into the wilderness when they were delivered from Egypt, but now they're in the wilderness. And so we can see that's going to be the same thing, the same darkness here when they're conquering the land. That is, it's the wilderness darkness. But here, this is Joshua's personal line. And so that wilderness darkness to him is still part of this darkness to this group. But he's going to be called as the leader to lead them out of the wilderness. Does that make sense? Because we see the same thing with other leaders. They're going to come at a time when there's a particular darkness.
It's a logical point worthy of further discussion.
So, okay. And you can see there's so many things here that we need to discuss. And that we have these tentative conclusions. But we can see the general principle. And as we go through these different lines, we have to keep coming back to these ones that we've constructed. And it's a lot of work. Sometimes I feel a little bit like, man, this is too much for me. I don't think I can do it. But it's going to take us time. You know, I think we'll be studying these lines for a long time still. I don't know how long, but it's not going to be a few weeks. But you can see how once we've gone through these lines again and again in the different histories, we're going to start to see the same patterns. But these patterns, the problem with them is they're way more detailed than we imagined before. That is, they exist on many levels in each history. Now we're going to understand the Bible better as we continue to go through it in this fashion. And you can see how studying the Bible in this way becomes very powerful, because one is you can remember things a lot better. We have a framework, so it's a great analytical tool. Any final comments before we close with prayer, other than that we have a lot of things to consider? Because we're going to continue with this. We're going to look at the next line below, conquering the land, tomorrow, and start on that. So going through the book of Joshua. And so there's some things that we definitely have to look at. Okay, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so very thankful for this study, for your guidance, and we just pray for your Holy Spirit to continue to work upon our hearts and minds. Help us to trust in you. We pray that as we look at the book of Joshua in the days to come, that you can help us in our personal study. I pray that you can be with those studying online, and that you can help this movement to understand these things so that we can understand our role and our responsibilities. Be with us now. May your angels watch over us today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.